wanted to prove that I could do that. I wanted to prove that the Leica camera that I was using that I used is fully capable of doing this thing. And at that time, it hadn't been used too much for the thing that I wanted to do. Well, anyway, they got me in the last weekend of qualifications, and that got me started. So for 32 years, I shot pictures for the Indianapolis Star, and it's been a real joy to me. And in addition to all the other things that I have done in photography, as a professional photographer for many, many years. But this shooting the 500 was something of a real thrill to me. I started out doing it because I was very much interested in photography and I wanted to prove something. Then I got interested in the 500-mile race, which came about a little later. I was always interested, but not the way it ended up. Anyway, until 1981 is when I quit going over and doing this thing. Now, do you want to start with this stuff?
Yeah.
All right.
Any more to say about this?
No, well, you ought to bring this out. Aggravation like this picture, too. They were pulling this car out, and it was the first year also that the car colors was duplicated in the uniforms of the crew. From there on, all crews did that. But up to that time, it was overhauls, any kind of old shirts, anything a garage workman would use. But it soon got to be on the pretty side so that all the crews looked nice, the cars looked nice. So it changed the atmosphere around the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Okay, John. As I mentioned a while ago, 1950 was my first time to shoot there, and I got a lucky break on a sequence. It was the last day of qualifications, and the lineup had already been full, or been filled. And Al Cole was out trying to bump somebody out of the race. And he went around, and I think I'm correct in this, it was also the first year that they used magnesium wheel, because the right rear wheel cracked coming down the straightaway. I didn't see this, but friends of mine told me later, were in a position to see this, that they could see the car as it came down the straightaway, and they could see it wobbling, and then it started spinning as it entered the first turn. And the thing that's unusual about this sequence is it started at a distance, and the climax came right in front of me, which you can see here, the spin where the car wheel, you see that wheel's bent there, and he's spinning around here, and as it gets closer, you see the wheel in the air there, here it is in the air, here it is in the air, and it's already gone past. And this one here, you can see the web of the wheel broken out. And anyway, that was the end of Hal Cole for that day. And here's an enlargement of the next to the last picture there, 16 by 20 that I liked. I wanted to show the wheel in the air and the thing about it. So that was that one. And now we get into some others here. Here's one by Merle George, who used to work with me at the store, and he shot this sequence of Tony Bentonhausen, and I don't see the year on there.
1956.
Oh, 56. Yeah, I see it now. 1956, yeah. And Merle got a...
George Mason.
And George Mason. I said Merle George. It was George Mason. George and Lloyd Mason both did a lot of shooting down there with me.
So cut a minute. I've got to go answer this.
Okay. One thing I haven't mentioned, as I did mention, I started in 1950. Well, it got so that every year I was able to talk the way in for a couple of friends, and we ended up having a team of 14 photographers, all using the same type camera, same Leica. And we had 3 on each turn. The turns are a quarter of a mile long, and you don't know where anything is going to happen. So what we did there was put up 3 men on a turn, and then we had one extra for the straightaway, which was a bad position to have to shoot anyway. But anyway, by having three in a turn, we can pretty well cover the thing. And an interesting side point was in 1955, when Bill Vukovich was killed, they used 23 pictures to cover the race action in the next issue of the paper on the day after the race. And out of the 23, 17 of them were shot by our, we call it the Muncie Bunch. And there's a couple of guys from Anderson, Don Pertain and I forget who else, but and Hugh Schisler from Hartford City. But we had a nice working team there for several years. And so this, this is another sequence of mine that was taken in 58, and it shows Chuck Wyatt spinning. I worked in the north. That first picture in 1950 was the southeast turn, the first turn. But I ended up, after about 1 year or two down there, working in the fourth turn, just before the cars entered the straightaway, the main straightaway. So this is where I shot this one in the fourth turn, Chuck Wyatt spin out. And then my old friend Charlie Terhune was sitting in the stands in the fourth turn. I was on down practically in just the beginning, well, I should say at the end of the fourth turn, when Doug McDonald tried to get from the back to the head of the race in the first lap, and he lost the car, causing a terrible wreck. He hit the wall, as you can see there. Well, in this picture here, number one is the pace lap going around with Jim Clark in the lead. He had the pole position. And then they go past the old tree that was on that turn. And you notice the fellows inside the track standing in their positions there to cover the race. Some newspapermen, some photographers, that. And then the third picture shows Jim Clark in the leading in the first lap, and followed by the 33 cars. And then Doug McDonald hit the wall. What you see white there is fire, and it's very smoke. Another interesting sidelight is the fact that the two cars in the race that year in the lineup, in the 33, was Eddie Sachs in one car and Doug McDonald, and they both used gasoline, whereas all the rest of the cars use, I think it's methanol or something, an alcoholic-based fuel that does not smoke and burn like that. But the McDonald hit that wall, and he died later, but it made the black smoke, and a lot of the cars went into that black smoke, but Eddie Sachs wasn't as lucky. He hit McDonald's car, and his car burned and exploded, and he, of course, was killed on the spot. And it was one of the worst wrecks I had ever seen there at the track in all the 32 years that I've shot pictures there. What's next, John? This one is, this is Jim Clark again. He spun in the fourth turn. What I liked about Jim Clark was he was always driving that car. If he was spinning, he was looking down the track to see where his automobile was going to go. And I consider him one of the finest drivers over there. And of course the lineup shows the photographers here on the thing. And go ahead there. That's Mike Mosley?
That's Leroy Yarborough.
Oh, Leroy Yarborough, yeah. This is a spin here taken by, well, do I say?
Yeah, you don't say. I guess it's you.
Yeah, it's my spin of Leroy Yarborough. And he's wanting to get out of that car. You see that he wasn't hanging around too long. And I don't blame him, because a lot of traffic out there. 33 automobiles, all going fast. And, oh, this is the Mosley spin, I think. Yeah. And Mike Mosley hit the wall there in the fourth turn, bounced off, and you see the wheel there. He come down and he slid into the wall, and from a distance you can't tell too much there, but Mike is very disgusted because it was the third time that he hit that wall in almost the same place.
This is 1971.
1971, yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. Forgive me the date on that, but I can't see it from here. Now, here's one of the older cars, an Offenhauser engine, on Freeland, and they're working on the engine back in the pit area, or back in the garage area. And
1954.
1954, yeah, that's for the front engine or the rear engines come in. And we're back in the garage. It shows you an Offenhauser being worked on with the rag stuck in the porthole to keep any dirt out, because they don't like to have dirt in those engines. And one of the nice thing that I have always enjoyed being at the track early on race day was the fact that they always go ahead and put that up, John. They had this band here with a checkered cap playing some early morning band music, which was delightful. Being an old band, and I love to hear a good old band.
This is 1954, Chief.
54, okay. This is 55, isn't it?
That's 56. No, 55.
55. Now there's Cal Nyday. Cal Nyday drove with an artificial left leg, and he hit the wall in the fourth turn right across the track from me, and I won a sequence of first place with the Associated Press on the sequence, and so they call it a professional class, and they come over here, and they were taking him out. Well, the car was on fire. Now, one of the problems here was Cal Nyday had a artificial left leg, and if someone got tangled up with the controls, and he had trouble getting him out of the car. Well, they finally got him out of the car. You can see the smoke there. The engine is on fire, but it's not a bad fire. But they didn't know this. The point is, they took him out of the car and laid him in the grass back behind the car waiting for an ambulance, which got there very quickly. And two interns jumped out of the ambulance and with a stretcher, and they laid it down, picked him up, one at his head and shoulders, the other at his feet. When they picked him up, the artificial left leg came loose. And they, knowing what it was, threw it out of the way. And at least 3 women passed out on the stand with that. It kind of gave him a thrill. But I thought Cal was dead on that, but he was there at the next year trying to get a ride on a race. Now this is a Agajanian sponsored car. 55 of them. Yeah. And again, it's still in the front engine job. And I don't know, it might have been this car. Now, Troy Ruttman drove a car like this for Agajanian, and this was taken back in the pit area, in the garage area. And here's another shot in the garage area, and that is a typical car back at the time. What's the date on that one?
55.
That's 55 again, yeah. Still front engine. Now, we're seeing all through here the typical race cars of that period, and they'll slowly get out of that.
Yeah.
And now here's this is the camera stand that was in front of the old pagoda that they had there, and that was the place where late in the night before the cameraman would get up there and to try to get the best position. It was always a big hassle there to get in that position. And here, of course, is one of the popular movie stars, Marie Wilson. She was very attractive, particularly from certain angles. You can see Jack Sorensen there and Hugh Schisler over to the left, and the rest of the guys shoot a picture of her. And this was always one of the movie stars was handy to kiss the winning driver. I think that he really liked the money better, but he didn't seem to complain about getting kissed by a good movie star. Here is another interesting thing. People brought in all kinds of things to build scaffolding in which they could get up on and see the race. Now, the guy that brought all the scaffolding in sold the positions on these stands. This one, I can't ever figure out what kept those things standing up. But anyway, this one seemed to be pretty well built up. Where in 1960 they had a terrible crash of a stand that wasn't done right, and 2 people were killed on the thing. But this was where the people sat up on that thing, and I don't know what happened if you got hungry, thirsty, or had to use some of the facilities. It looked like a very unhandy place to escape from. And here's Larry Bisaglia, first man at the track. He was usually at the gate back in, well, he started in 1950, the same year I did. He and his little dog was always there. What's the date on that?
That's 56.
56, yeah.
This is 71.
And his little dog, and for years, he was the first man at the gate, and they got so that, and he had an old panel truck that he drove from California, covered with all kinds of stickers of races and automobiles and gasoline. Finally, the Speedway bought him a nice new truck and put his old one and all the stickers in the Speedway Museum, which you'll see if you go down there. The one on the left, he had his little dog. When I saw him on the one on the right, I don't know the date of that.
71.
Yeah. Well, at that time, I went to Larry and I said, "Where's your little dog?" He says, "He's getting too old to make it. He had to stay in Chicago with his sister," he said. Well, anyway, that's just another. Oh, this is one of the first turbine automobiles, sponsored by STP, and yeah, Pernelli Jones drove it, and it was quite a thrill to see that thing go around the track and make practically no noise. And so anyway, that's the car that started the turbine bit.
See what's going on out here. We have somebody here who wants to see it.
Yeah, okay.
Go on in.
I don't know if Roger remembers me or not.
I remember the face, but not the beard.
How are you, sir? It's
Fine.
good to see you again.
What is your name?
Eddie Self.
Eddie
Self.
Eddie Self. My
Yeah.
God, yeah, I remember the name now.
Yeah, I'm the young one.
Yeah. Okay.
You knew my dad too, I think.
Yeah, that's the name it. God. Is there a place to get a drink of water up here?
Sure, there's water fountain out in the.
Okay, I'll go out in a little bit.
Yeah.
You want to sit down, Eddie, or
Well, I just wanted to come over and say hi and.
what are you doing now?
I manage the photo service here at Ball State.
Well, good.
I worked for a while in your old store.
Yeah.
With, when Jack and Merle had it after
Yeah.
you left. And worked the newspaper for a few years and then
Oh.
came out here. I've been out here for about 32 years
Oh,
now.
my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you remember the name Ron Partain.
Oh, right, real well.
Yeah, and
In fact, I knew his father. Father was a very good friend of mine.
yeah, you guys worked together at the Speedway.
Yeah, I just telling her what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so
This
we,
is really a neat deal that you're getting all this assembled. And
well, they want the pictures, and that solves the problem. What am I going to do with them? I got 3 kids. How are you going to divide these up with 3 kids? Put it on tape, and I give each a tape.
Yeah.
I say kids, my God, they're getting as old as I am.
Yeah, that's my dad would say the same thing about me.
Wait, what'd your dad do then?
He had a grocery
That's-
store in Muncie.
Yeah, down
for
on
years.
the
Mhm.
Council?
Council on Howard Street.
Yeah, Council Howard, yeah.
Yeah, he was there for 40-some years.
Yeah.
And that's where I grew up in the grocery.
You didn't want to be a grocer.
No, sir.
Well, see, I grew up in my dad's drugstore. I didn't want to be a pharmacist.
No, I didn't want any part
Yeah.
of owning my own business.
My dad wanted me to be a pharmacist. And I told Dad, I just can't do this. The idea of standing behind a prescription counter and selling toothpaste all day long, it just didn't really do me any good. So he taught me into coming out to Ball State and taking a business course, which I did. And I did learn to type, which I do use it. But you know, the funny thing is, what's your position here now, John? At this time, I'd like for the cameraman here to pan up and get John Straw's picture here. Would you pan up and catch a picture of him? John Straw is the archives and special collection in the library here, the head of it, and he's helped me here, but I'm not sure he's getting in all the action. So I thought to mention who it is that's helped me do this thing. And Mike, what's your last name, Mike?
Twig.
Twig.
Okay, guess you heard that. And so we'll go on with the pictures here now. Well, I think I've told all
Finish
this.
with this one, okay.
There's much to do as they made about those. Well, this is just an ordinary scene in the garage area. They have one of those cars on the track, pull it back in the garage there in a few minutes, they got it all torn down, which is better than you can do at any garage in town. Okay. I just showed some of the insides of the car with the body off, and it shows some of the mechanisms, some of the wiring, and all the stuff that the guy has in front of him, except when he's driving it, it's all closed in, so it looks prettier.
It says Mickey Thompson's four-wheeler.
Oh yeah. They tried several things. There was a six-wheeler one year. I never get a picture of that, but they tried different things on the track. It always ended up four wheels seemed to work pretty good. That, I think, is Jim Clark's number one.
That's Foyt. A.J. Foyt.
Oh, A.J. Foyt. Oh, yeah,
68.
sure, number one. Yeah. And that still got now that's a rear engine job. When they got in the rear engine, they cleaned it up there back in the back of the garage area. And it shows the trend away from, what was the year on that one?
68.
68, yeah. Right. And now there's
That's McCluskey's.
that's McCluskey's car, and it's on the track. It looks like race day. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're being rolled out to the lineup.
Yeah, rolled out to the lineup. Okay.
1968.
I'm having difficulty reading from this distance here, especially. Anyway, that's one of the interesting scenes in the morning. Getting ready for the race, getting this thing started was a big thrill almost for everybody. There's that back end of the STP, and of course, this is a real subtle thing. My point in taking this, it was taken with a Leica reflex camera. I was so interested in seeing one of the news guys using that, I shot a picture of him using it. I think the guy was from Chicago, I'm not certain. Here's back, I don't know just what year, I don't know that the year is on.
69.
69, yeah. Much to Harlan Fengler's regret and disgust, they decided to have a balloon race in the morning on qualifications practice weekend on between 11:30 and 12 while they cleaned the track. And they were filling the balloons with hot air to take off for the race. Well, it wasn't necessarily this one, but this one represents the thing. One of these balloons was filled with hot air, but it got away with no pilot. And we'll turn the thing over and show you what happened. It went down, it swooped over the stand that you saw in the first picture, and then the wind took it down toward the north end of the track, and the balloon basket swooped down and hit this building, which happened to be the ladies' toilet. And the reason you know it's a toilet, there is a roll of toilet paper hanging right there. And the women were scared in there, and they got out. You go out there now, I haven't been there for a few years, but I venture to say the building is still there with the new one that's painted with balloons on all four sides of it, for people to remember it by. And here's one shot of the sequence a while ago I showed you of Mike Mosley. I like that. He hit the wall, and you see the front end of the car banged up, and he lost this wheel. Now, in that sequence, I didn't point this out, but for picture after picture, that tire was still photographed rolling down the track. But he hit that wall and busted up the front end of the car, and you can see why he didn't continue in the race. And this is unidentified. I don't know whose car this is, but he had some trouble. Now this had to be during a practice day, probably Sunday morning, because there's no one in the stands there on the fourth turn. So on race day, that would have been filled long ago. But that's the whole thing there. Oh, that guy, he's popping up. That, of course, is me. Charlie Trehune, my old friend from Middletown, Ohio, shot this picture of me, and I always liked it. And although I should have had either a 500-mile race hat on or a Leica hat, I had Jorgensen Steel, which was a company that I had visited in Dayton. And so Charlie Trehune took the picture, and I liked it. And here's one of them that I shot of Ralph Saturday. Can you zoom in and show that a little better? It's one I shot of Ralph at the track, and standing in front of some of the paraphernalia there.
Where are these now?
These pictures are all bring back a lot of memories. I had
It's gonna fall out. Let me, take it out.
I had breakfast with him. That's Clark Gable. Of course, he was clear down at the other end of the restaurant. But I ate at the same time at the same place. I'll put it that way. We didn't have too much conversation.
What year was that?
I really can't tell. It's early. It'd be 50, 51. See, they were shooting. I think it was the race in 51. They movie crews were there with, I believe, Barbara Stanwyck and Clark Gable were in the movie, and it was something about the 500, but the race was, I believe, shortened by rain, and they had to hire a bunch of race drivers over the rest of the week to finish up. This, I'm sure, is Jim Clark, and in his rear-engine car, and just a shot I made of him, and oh yeah, there's Andretti. That's the year he won the race because he had a little accident there during, I think it was during qualifications or something, or practice or something. Because you see he's got an upper lip is all bound up there, and so
69, man.
69, yeah. And that is
that's Foyt.
Oh, that's A.J. Foyt, yeah, in the car,
Yeah.
and sitting there in the pits, ready to go out on either a practice run or a race. It couldn't be a race because I wouldn't be in the pits. I had to be out of the pit area 10 minutes before race time. And so that's the point there.
Okay. Now we're going through some that are going to be in here. That first bunch is what will be at the.
Oh yeah.
At the
Okay.
EV
This is
balls
more race morning stuff, some cars, and shows you the lines there. I don't think there's a date on that, is there, John?
No, there's no information.
Well, it's early because back in the early 60s was that car design, or late 50s, either one. And now here's Jim Hurtubise, 56, and he stuck with the front engines for a long time after the rest of them had gone to rear engine. But it didn't do any good, but he had trouble in the fourth turn there, and they were coming tow him back in and get him fixed up. I don't think he got in the race that year.
Doing qualifications.
That's back in the garage area at the gas pumps, and where they're giving some checkouts on the thing. And here, coming up here is race morning, lineup of a lot of VIPs and race crews out there waiting for everything to start. And of course the pit is lined with movie stars and politicians and any number of other people who didn't have to pay the way in. So this is shows you some of the restful reclining positions that the infield gets into. This could be during a race, waiting for the race, or the race is over. It doesn't make much difference. They just laid there and usually drinking beer. This is an interesting picture, and I'm sorry I don't have too much on it. Well, Gene Hartley's spin in 53, and that was shot by Merle George, yeah, and for the Indianapolis Star. And you see the car is actually in the air here on the picture number 3, where he hit the wall and bounced off. So, and here's another sequence by, this is Charles Goddard. I hope Charles is still around and can get out there. He shot this coming on the straightaway in 1956, and there was a spin and everything, and he shot it. He had his Leica with a 125 millimeter lens trained on that thing, and I thought he got a nice sequence of the thing, and I always liked it. And 1957 sequence of shot by Lloyd Macy. Lloyd had worked for me for a while in Indianapolis, and then he went to work for the Star as an artist. He was very good. He did a lot, and his son, I mentioned George Macing earlier. George was his son, and he shot a lot of stuff there.
Foyt spin.
And then another of Lloyd Macy, and that's spin by A.J. Foyt, and in 58, and it's an interesting spin. You see, the fellows don't like to sit around their cars after they spin, so they figure it's open season on them. I couldn't avoid the Purdue band. I love bands, and they're always putting on a good show at the 500-mile race before the race starts. And here's car for a Las Vegas special, it says, and it shows the starter. Now they had to put a long shaft in through the front of the car, and then the starting motor engaged with that. And one car, one time, did that, but they didn't get the shaft out. And he went around the track with that shaft hanging out. If it ever hit the track, it would have pulled all of that car up in the air badly. But they black flagged him and got it out. He didn't know it was there. Another scene back in the garage area. They're warming up a car, checking it, and just warming it up, it says there. And we always got a crowd of people running. From the back, the number 47, well, it doesn't matter who that is, I can't see it.
What? It says 1967.
1967, yeah. Here's a Dayton Steel Foundry car with the mechanic working on the thing. Number 77 was always their number. They never did any good that I know of any time I was there. Well, it says Dayton Steel Wheel. It's some of the Walter group. And there's Joachim Rindt. I think he's from Austria. Anyway, it's one of those countries over there that I don't know if we're at war with them now or not. I can't keep track of all that. And just an early morning shot race day, looking down.
Qualifications, it says.
Qualifications. Oh,
First
qualifications.
day
Yeah.
of qualifications.
Yeah.
71.
71. Yeah. Yeah. And here's R87 McLaren Special. Peter Revson, who was a good driver, drove there, but he got killed over in Europe someplace. Correct.
Dick Simon.
And that Dick Simon?
Dick Simon, 71.
1971, Dick Simon. And this looks like qualifications. I don't know. Probably is.
Yeah.
Has more of the atmosphere of qualifications.
We'll cut for a minute, because I gotta get some more.
Yep, shove that lever up.
Ready?
Yeah. Okay. This is the only picture that I was able to shoot at the wreck in 1964 in which Eddie Sachs and Doug McDonald was killed. Because the wreck occurred past me. A close inspection of that particular picture would show the tail end of Eddie Sachs' car just disappearing into there. Read the notes, Eddie Sachs, you can see it, number 25, just barely on the thing, and that he went in there, of course, was hit with the explosion with Doug McDonald's car. And I don't know who that driver is there, but he's pointing down the track, and something has happened to him, and he's explaining to the other guy what happened. And there's Tom Carnegie. He used to announce the track and has written some books on the 500. Was a well-known announcer. And there's the only race he was in was a political race. It's
Goldwater.
who?
Barry Goldwater.
Oh yeah, Barry Goldwater. And he was related to Abbott Johnson. And I asked him to let me take a picture of him. You see that badge he has on says 99. Now, our photographer's got 9. 9 meant you could be any place on the track, but 10 minutes before race time, you had to get out of the pit. 99 meant you could do that darn near anything you wanted to do, except drive a car. This is an interesting thing here. I want to read this to you. That this was taken in 1973. Tony Hahn had brought Rene Thomas over from France for the 1973 race. Rene, in his checkered cap, was 85 years old at at this time. Rene won the 500-mile race in 1914, and he drove a Delage, which he is standing beside here in this picture, an old Delage. And behind Rene is Harry Hart, right here with no driver, and of course recognizable easily as Duke Nalon, right there. And I have taken pictures of both of those guys. And see, Duke drove in 10 races from 1938 to 1953. And he had a bad wreck in 49, terrible wreck. But he lived through it and came on all right. Had Wilbur Shaw, an old timer around the track and owned part of it one time, was in Hellman, but he was killed in an automobile, or an airplane accident later up near Decatur, Indiana. And there's Bob Grimm, and one of the drivers. Here's another sequence coming up here of that Fred Mumaw was a friend of mine in Dayton, lived down the street from me a few doors, and he loved to come over to the track and shoot sequence pictures. And one of our, Al Lagusta or Lagusta, I guess which it is.
1971.
Yeah, in 71 in Spin on Fourth Turn, yeah. And here was a car that had a little trouble in the fourth turn. Lost the front end of it, lost the wheel, and became more or less undrivable. Here's a secret of Don Pertain from Anderson, Indiana, one of our group, and Jack Turner's spin in the southeast turn. An interesting thing about Don Pertain, in 1955, when Bill Vukovich was killed coming out of the second turn, southeast turn, Don was in the turn and ran up, and the Vukovich car was upside down, and some smoke was coming out of it, and he shot pictures of it, and a film runner ran up to Don and said, "Give me your film," rushes up the paper. And Don says, "There's no use in that, it's just an automobile upside down." And they says, "Well, give me the film, maybe they'll use it." After the race, we all went up to the newspaper, and everyone was slapping Don on the back, complimenting him on the picture. And he said, "What are you talking about? Just an automobile upside down." He said, "My gosh, did you see what you got?" He said, "Yeah, a car upside down." He said, "Look at it." Vukovich's hand was reaching out from under the car like he's trying to get help. It went into Life magazine and went all over the world because of it. It's a rather astounding picture that he took. Be that a side thing here to mention, I think all through this thing, some people may gather the idea that we photographers became millionaires over these pictures. Some of us actually got paid for the gasoline to get there. Others were not fortunate. That didn't happen very often. Well, here's another one by Merle George, and was Jim McQuitty's car, spin in the northeast turn. Merle worked in the northeast turn, whereas I worked in the northwest turn. And another sequence here by Fred Mumaw, Trotwood, Ohio, of Jim Pertwee's spin coming out of the fourth turn in 71 and was out of the race. And here's a sequence that Paul Russo was taken by George Macy in 1956. And you see those guys don't wait around long when they've had trouble on the track. They don't just saunter away, they run. And there's another by my own friend Hubert Chisler, Hartford City. All these guys I've mentioned now was in our original bunch of 14 guys, the one I called the racetrack team. And here's another more a static shot of front of a travel lodge. It was I can't see the car number on that. Well, anyways, a nice looking car.
Looks like Dick Simon.
Oh, Dick Simon. Okay. Yeah, it probably was his car, yeah. And here's another car, somebody talked to the driver. Unfortunately, the son didn't show that. It was Larry Dixon was in the car. I think that was during qualification in 68. And
front end of number 33, it says.
Yeah, car number 33. and it shows some of the mechanic parts of the wheel suspension and some of the other rods and everything that goes into making up an automobile. Now this picture coming up is a very early one I shot. Yeah, and I shot at the, well, I'm pretty sure that's an Offenhauser, but this was shot years before I went to the Speedway for the Star. A friend of mine with the Standard Oil Company took several of us down there during qualification, and I got this shot of the engine. Another detailed shot of the, shows the car with the hood off of it, and you see here's either an oil coolant or radiator horizontally there to suck the air through the coolant, but the steering wheel and stuff is not in this thing yet. But there's an awful lot of design in there.
We need to cut.
Well, this is a car back in the, yeah, this is a car back in the garage area, car number 45, which is rather obvious, but from there on, my knowledge of this car is very meager, to say the most. Obviously, someone with official with a car is talking to one of the racetrack officials by the badge on his shoulder there. And this is Jerry Grant, and this was, I shot in '71, and it's probably during qualifications. It has that atmosphere and the number of people around.
Count for the pants.
Yeah. And that
George Snyder.
Cornelius Jones Ford, George Snyder driver. Yeah. And car 29, yeah. And here's car 64 Gilmore. That had to be an A.J. Floyd. Art Fowler drove in the team for Gilmore.
Yep.
And Art was killed later. What year was that?
That's 71.
Yeah, I don't know if it was in 71 or a year later, but Art Fowler was killed. There's a track. And here's a Weinberger Special, I guess, 45. I don't. Oh, Ron Bucknam, 1968. All the pipes and hoses and things that they have to put into a small space, and then they got to be sure that it all works. And that's quite a problem, quite an engineering feat, and a good demonstration of ability of the crews and everybody. There's that looks like a rear engine Offenhauser. It might be a Ford. From all the plumbing on there, it looks like a V8. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Gordon John Cobb.
Yeah, Gordon John Cobb.
67.
67, yeah. That could have been a Ford. Well, there's Hurtubise again in that 56. It's another angle from the earlier shot I had of him where he had trouble in the fourth turn. Oh, yeah. This is another my friend Hugh Schister took in 58. It shows a car here at Elysian spun with past Dick Rathman and both sliding into the wall, as it says there, and others getting into the thing. It was quite a mix-up there in the, I think, the third turn, or just coming out of the third turn. But Hubert Schister got a very nice sequence on that. And I am going to, after this one, I'm going to take a little rest here.
That's the last one.
Here is a sequence by for the Indianapolis Star by, again, Lloyd Macy, Muncie. That's the 1957 race of Judge Larson's spin in the southeast turn. Now, all of them.